our Chief Investment Officer. Jenny Lee, our Senior Managing Partner from Granite Asia. Ben Prade, Partner at GP Bullhound. Ole Ruch, Managing Partner at Nordstar. And moderating this session, we have Vidya Ganesan, Partner and Managing Partner from McKinsey, as our expert moderator for this session. Over to you, Vidya.
Testing. Works? Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. I hope you've had a fantastic morning. And welcome to this panel. I'm very excited to have such an amazing group of panelists with me. Maybe just to kick us off, I'm going to just go around and kick off by asking each of you, what's the current state of venture capital? What's the landscape like in Southeast Asia? But also, how do you see it evolving given everything that's going on in terms of geopolitics in the world, the macro environment, etc.? How do you see this evolving? Headwinds, tailwinds, what are your thoughts? Hazman, you want to start?
Thank you, Vidya. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, not so bad, like 50% attendance compared to this morning, so not so bad. Anyway, first of all, before I start, I'd like to congratulate the organizer. I think it's such an amazing event and hope to see more of this. I think for the benefit of our friends here from outside Southeast Asia, maybe I can share some cool facts about Southeast Asia or ASEAN. We have a population of 670 million across 10 countries, the third largest population in the world after China and India. Half of the population is below 30 years old, so that's very interesting. We are third largest GDP in Asia, fifth globally at $4 trillion. We have 500 million internet users, that's 75% of penetration rate, 97% mobile penetration rate with Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. Each have 100 million subscribers. That's amazing. In terms of in the tech space, we have a GMV growth of more than 10 times in 10 years. We were at $30 billion in 2015, and the aim, actually the forecast is to grow to 350 billion in 2025. And we had from 2-3 unicorns in 2013 to about 23 in 2021. But of course, as we all know, post-COVID, there's a bubble in the tech space, and then with the high interest rate environment, all of us have to face the same storm. So of course, being the smaller economy relative to the US and all, we've been hit harder. And there's a reduction in terms of funding the activities as well as deal size. But then again, this is also, we see at KWAP as an inflection point. This is an opportunity for us to come in. There's a saying, of course, that you cannot time the market, but you can spend time in the market. So as a long-term investor, if our horizon is 5 to 10 years, we do see 2023, 2024 is a great vintage for us to come into the VC sector. There is opportunity here for us to play because one, valuation is adjusting downwards. Valuation gap between startups in the Southeast Asia country are converging. And we genuinely see more and more capital allocators and investors coming into Southeast Asia. So again, I think in the next section I will talk about our program, our program in the VC investment, but we do see there's a potential for us. And I would say that with regards to Southeast Asia, particularly in Malaysia, we are at the forefront. I've shared this last night, but I'll share this with the audience. We are at the forefront of a stark improvement when it comes to ability, likability, and visibility. In terms of ability, there's a huge and strong talent coming into Malaysia. In terms of likability, we have a friendly government with interesting incentive and policies like what we shared here today at KL20. In terms of likability, it's cheaper to operate from Malaysia relative to our neighbors. There's a definitely cost advantage, and that will definitely support the profitability story. And last but not least, in terms of visibility, you can see we are trying to come out. Corrected the perception and trying to do more and be in the space with the developed markets as well. So yeah, we are very positive in this space. I think the storm is hitting the bottom. We are at the inflection point and we look forward to do more. Southeast Asia and Malaysia is open for business. We're ready for business and we look forward to partner with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for kicking us off on a very optimistic note. Jenny, your thoughts?
Yeah, hi everyone. Very happy to be here. You know, so as a GP, as an investor, we need more LPs like KWAP, who is long-term vested in the region, flush with cash, and very willing to support entrepreneurship. So I think at the very top level, I would say that if you're an entrepreneur today in the market, it's a terrible time. Right, as we all know, I think the global market is, right now, if you look at venture capital, private equity as an asset class, it's probably the worst asset class right now because interest rate is high globally. The growth rate has come down. Public market has shut off in terms of IPO. And therefore, you know, as an entrepreneur, you are back to really building real businesses that can sustain without a lot of new capital to burn, as the cost of capital is very expensive. So I want to paint, like, there's never a good time for entrepreneurship. In this case, to be fair, if you're just trying to be an entrepreneur for fun, it's not the best time. Go back to study, go back to work for big companies, curate your skills. But however, on the flip side, you know, when markets are down, as Hazman has highlighted as well, the competition for talent is down. You don't have a business idea that's then being replicated 1,000 times instantly within a week, right? And therefore, if you truly have a way to beat the market, great product that can come to market and a team that's willing to go along with you, it is a good time. So I want to give another view. If you're an entrepreneur in Southeast Asia, finally, I think the next 10, 20 years, it will be the best window in the market. And why? I think there are Southeast Asia specific reasons, and then there's also global reasons. For Southeast Asia specific reasons, as we all know, I think post-COVID, the region has been, in terms of digital acceleration, it's really come across and helped to bring, you know, the whole concept of digital government, online services, prevalent across all different age groups, between public, private sectors. And so that mindset is there. They build for infra, for access is actually available from the regional growth perspective. I think the second aspect that we are seeing is that a lot of the governments, whether it's Malaysia, Indonesia, in this region is also saying that now it's the time to try and really get that private enterprise growth engine to be a key component of economic growth. And so I was taking notes of all the different paths. If you're an entrepreneur, you can now choose where to put your headquarters, whether it's in Malaysia or Indonesia or Middle East. So there is a lot of competition for you. I think as an entrepreneur today, you can take your time to figure out where is the best place to locate your company that will allow you the best chance to access to market, talent, and then possibilities. Then I think the last tailwind I want to add is that, you know, in this case, Southeast Asia will benefit from some of the geopolitics. In the past, when we think about STEM graduates, you know, China has the advantage of 4 or 5 million of STEM graduates every year. India is, you know, 3 million. Southeast Asia, I tried to get a consensus check among the Southeast Asia country, and the best I could come out with was 1 million at best across all the disparate countries. And so when you're competing, the war of talent for entrepreneurship is the #1 consideration, right? And so today, there are the people flow, right? People from North Asia, even US, India, they are moving and they are going to areas that can be more neutral for entrepreneurship that allows you to build a product for the world, right? Versus just building a product for India or building a product for China or building a product for your own country. So I think this is the advantage of being in so-called neutral, smaller states. And if you leverage this well as well with this capital and the talent flow, I think the chance to build lasting companies is there. But obviously, in this current environment, valuation is low, very hard to get financing. And so I think that grit, that resilience, that vision that is going to drive you to build your company has to be innate, right? Again, do this because you want to build the next great companies for the many decades and not just do it because it's cool, something out of school.
Thank you, Jenny. Ben?
Yeah, hi. I definitely agree. It's probably a better time to be an investor than it is to be an entrepreneur right now. We've obviously seen a very big correction in valuations. We are entering a new, if you like it, super cycle based around AI. It's very hard to understand the productivity gains that AI is going to drive. How do you price that into company valuations? It's almost impossible to say, but we're definitely going to see a lot more productivity coming from companies over the next, decade or so. In terms of entrepreneurs, I mean, I think, great entrepreneurs can build great companies at any time. But maybe a perspective a little bit from Europe. I think I see the rise here in Malaysia. So many great people, so much alignment between private capital, government policy. It's quite incredible to see that all in one room from what I've seen just in the last 24 hours. So I think this is a great environment. I think in Europe, we've always been a little bit in the shadow of the US. I think one of the things that has changed in Europe over the last 10, 15 years is as we have received more international capital, predominantly from US funds coming in, it's changed the ambition level of European founders. So we used to have a problem in Europe where we would build a good company and a founder would be very happy to sell their company very quickly, make a good bit of money, and then go off and do something else. What we're seeing now in Europe is companies are being built with a global view from day one. They're being called, English-sounding name. They create their equity story very much from a global point of view. And I think for ecosystems that are trying to catch up, the key thing is that founders start their companies with huge ambition to take on the global marketplace, not just the local marketplace. And I think that means creating an equity story, structuring your accounts, hiring people with very much a global perspective from day one that allows you to be attractive to international capital from day one. Now, one of the things that my firm wants to do, we're no experts on this region, but we will be opening our first office here. We will be offering M&A services, if you like. And one thing a good M&A advisor can do can help companies think about structuring their equity story and their whole presentation to a global audience, to US investors, European investors, Middle East investors. So I think the message I would bring is the European experience, which is go global from day one and have high ambition.
Thank you. Ole, final thoughts on this question?
Yeah, it's going last when people are giving so many great views is not the easiest. But if I were to think about it, if you look at a 10-year perspective, I do think Southeast Asia has lagged both when it comes to venture capital inflows, but also exits and opportunities for entrepreneurs to actually monetize it. I do think one thing, and we are global investors who invest globally, but I think one thing that did surprise me and we might actually struggle a bit with now is that at the top of COVID, there's a lot of buoyancy in the markets. So people are thinking that they could sit in their offices in London or New York or wherever they might be and said, well, I'll do deals over Zoom and I'll invest in Singapore and Indonesia and wherever that might be. And listen, there's 300 million people in Indonesia. These companies must be worth something one day, right? And we're willing to pay a high price for that. And I do think because of that buoyancy, I think that actually the sort of downturn that's been alluded to now actually feels a lot harder here in Southeast Asia than many other places. And I do think that we have this return of fundamentals. So I am still quite optimistic, and I think I'm optimistic for a few reasons. I think, one, I do think that we have a few of these super trends that are happening right now, one of them being AI. I think that if you look at Malaysia specifically, but also a few other places, you have definitely a cost advantage. And one of the things that Jenny touched upon is, how do you get more graduates actually to engage with that? And if you do that in a meaningful way, I do think Malaysia specifically, but also other countries can play a significant role as you develop those ecosystems. I think the other trend that we're following very closely as well is the strategy around geopolitics and the shift that's happening. I do think this country specifically, with its cultural diversity, will actually be a major benefactor of it. And I do think that we'll see a lot of FDI coming in, both because of that privileged position, the cultural diversity, support the government, but also the fact that, you know, there's actually a need. And then I think that you have the semiconductor industry that's already established. I think that when we see all the initiatives are happening around that, I do think there's an opportunity to ride that wave, right? And I think that for us, again, that we don't have a need to invest in Southeast Asia. We do it because we want to. You know, we'd rather try to make quite specific bets around, you know, the ecosystems that happens around it, rather than to make a macro play around it. And I do think that there's a lot of opportunities that are being created. That being said, I think it will continue to be difficult for a while. I am very happy that there's not only supportive LPs such as, you know, Hazman and KWAP here, who are doing their best to actually support the ecosystem and attract GPs and attract great companies here, but also, you know, Southeast Asia specific venture capital firms that will continue to showcase and develop the best talent here in the region.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. What I took away was, yes, maybe a difficult macro environment to be an entrepreneur, but it's all in where you play and how you play, right? And there's a lot of hope there in terms of the way you play, but also picking the right LPs, like our friend here. Maybe on that note, Hazman, question to you, right? Malaysia has implemented many initiatives over the years, especially in the last, call it 3-5 years, to boost the startup ecosystem, including, for example, the Malaysia Technology Development Corporation. KWAP itself launched the Pioneer Fund, Dana Perintis, in September 2023. Can you tell us a bit more about how effective have these been in actually attracting and nurturing startups, and what more can be done? And also on that note, what's the future of impact investing looking like?
I think just now my CEO mentioned about as part of our seeking alpha. I mean, we have a beta problem in this region, so we need to seek the alpha. And as part of seeking alpha, we've decided back in 2022 to double our exposure in private markets. And private markets consist of PE, VC, infra, and real estate. And within PE alone, we were at 4% then, and our aim is to triple our PE exposure from 4 to 12%. And out of that 12% allocation, 15% are allocated to VC. So the implied value of that 15% of that 12 out of that 12 is about $1 billion. So we have made that decision that, hey, let's put some significant allocation. Of course, small as percentage of the total fund, but in terms of value, is big into VC. And why we want to do that is because we, again, first, our fiduciary is to get returns, and second, we see this as a beacon of growth for Malaysia. We want to address the conundrum of the private markets. There's not enough startups in the market because there's not enough capital in the market, and so on and so forth. So we want to play that catalytic role. So since last year, we've been quite rampant in terms of deploying our investment in the private markets. But in deploying this investment, we also say to ourselves, hey, of course, it's always easier to invest outside Malaysia, but what are we doing as a national pension fund in Malaysia? And of course, as a pension fund, each pension fund and sovereign wealth fund have different risk appetite. And as a pension fund, we think that it's best to deploy this investment into VC through a program. Hence why we launched Dana Perintis, which is a 500 million ringgit allocation, where half will be invested into Malaysia-focused VC funds, and half will be invested into startups that fundraising from Series B onwards. I think, again, we are still learning this, and being a pension fund, we want to sort of manage our risk, and that's why it's Series B onwards. But having said that, as part of our strategy, in order for us to be able to deploy across all stages, when we invest in these VC funds, the 250 million ringgit, it cut across all strategy. So we have identified 8 VC funds, which we have announced 2, but 6 more to come. But out of these 8, 1 are in the early stage, 5 are in the venture stage, 1 in the growth stage, and 1 is in the secondary stage. And this is very important because we need to not just to invest across all the stages, but also to make sure that there's a liquidity event. Hence why we think it's important to support the secondary stage as well. On top of this Dana Perintis, which is Malaysia focus, we know that we need to develop, first we need to develop local talent, and second, we need to bring global talent to Malaysia. and sort of train and expose our guys so that we can compete. I mean, we don't want to be a local champion only. We want to be a regional and global champion. So it's important to sort of bottom up, train our Malaysians, and top down, bring the global talent come to Malaysia and look at Malaysia. So on top of Dana Perintis, we do have our normal allocation where we can invest in regional VCs, for example. And what we do is that we ask them to consider opening and expand an office here in Malaysia. So that's second. The third one, we also invest in regional and global startups. For example, last year we announced we invested in e-fishery. And again, part of this, there is a strategy angle, i.e. we do want them to expand and look at Malaysia. And our work doesn't stop at VC. We started with Dana Perintis for VC, but this year, hopefully next month or next 2 months, we will announce something in the private equity space as well. So as a national pension fund, we know it's very important for us to ensure that there's a continuous deployment of capital into the market inside these private markets.
Thank you, and I hope all the Malaysian pensioners today and future pensioners are feeling reassured by that very thoughtful narrative of what you're doing. Thank you so much. You touched on an important point around talent development. I want to pick on that with you, Ole. You've had multiple stints in Asia and Southeast Asia in your professional life, operated at Airbnb, WeWork, and now you're investing actively in the region, right? Can you share what role VCs play to support the growth of talent, and what does that mean in Southeast Asia? What initiatives have shown real promise in this space?
Sure. So I think, first of all, I think that one of the major roles, of course, of VCs is providing capital. And I think on one hand, capital is actually safety. It's the fact that there's an active venture capital environment means that some of the best companies and the best talent will have the opportunity to build businesses, hire teams, and actually create something for themselves, but also for the broader economy that they can be proud of and actually they can make a livelihood out of. So I think that in itself is, how we think about our function now. There's definitely more tactical things that VCs can be doing and should be doing. I know there's a number of great incubator programs and accelerator programs that have been started, whether that's global firms such as Antler 500. I know that Antler, for instance, a partnership with Kasana here, which I think is really impressive. So I think that that's something that we really look to ensure that, there's a path for top talent, whether they are fresh out of school or actually coming from a more corporate job, or even have been founders before, where they actually can feel like they can develop themselves and learn what it takes to build a startup. I think the other thing that we think about as global investors is, and what I've seen in multiple sort of startup ecosystems around the world is, how can we bring some of the best regional companies or global companies even to create offices in the markets here? So bringing a scale-up, for instance, if you bring a US scale-up, so I worked at Airbnb, and actually we were talking about a friend of ours that I worked with about 14 years from now. When we set up Airbnb in Southeast Asia, I was able to hire someone who was a really high-performing person from McKinsey to run our Southeast Asia office, right? So what he could do then was that he could learn the startup mentality, the startup thinking, but he was sort of underwritten by a large US scale-up business that could provide him the safety, provide him, the real pay, because pay matters, right? And he could learn what it means to be in a startup, but in a local office, which was much smaller. Now, I think that person might would have not gone and built a startup himself directly, but what happened since was, from working at Airbnb in that scale-up, he actually went now and founded a business himself very successfully. We are very happy investors and brought one of the first checks into that business. And I do think that's another role that we can do, is really help global scale-up companies see the potential of these markets, bring them into the market, have them actually transition talent over from corporates and other type of talent pools, and actually build the ecosystem that way.
Thank you. Your comment about the McKinsey colleague who you hired for a startup triggered another thought about another McKinsey colleague who's going to head up something interesting. Ben, over to you. Congratulations on GP Bullhound opening its office in Malaysia this morning. And one of my ex-colleagues will be leading the charge in Malaysia. But question to you around, look, you have a global track record of advising, of picking, investing in tech startups, right? When you look at the tech startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia, how do you identify startups that are well poised for international expansion from the get-go? And also one bonus question for you is, with so many tech startups in the AI and Gen AI space, how do you tell hype apart from value? How do you tell the wheat from the chaff? How do you do it?
Well, maybe I'll start with the AI one. I think that's relatively easy, although a complex subject. I think when it comes to investing in AI, from our point of view, from an investment, already AI companies are probably overpriced. There's bubble territory there already. But I think that if you're going to play in the AI space, from our point of view, you're really only looking at companies that hold proprietary data that they own themselves and can be mined using whatever methods they can come up with. I think the actual AI applications, the problem there is that the big seven, the big companies can build AI applications in one afternoon. You can invest in a company and then it can become part of what Microsoft gives you for free the day after. So we're a little bit cautious around that space. As always, I think people overestimate in the short term what is possible and underestimate in the long term. So I think the key with AI is that it's not just now or the next 6 months or the next year. This is a 10 or 20-year cycle that we're going through. And I think the real breakthroughs are probably still quite far down the line. In terms of international expansion, going back to my previous point, I think the key thing is ambition again. I think when you are looking for international expansion, you're looking for founders who are willing to potentially move abroad for 1 or 2 years to expand their companies. I think we've seen many companies go abroad, hire sales teams that have never really worked in that location. I think the best salesperson is the founder. At the end of the day, they have to hit the road. So if you're looking at international expansion, it's not going to be comfortable. You may have to move the kids and your spouse abroad. These are things you're going to have to sacrifice. But when it comes to Malaysia, again, I think one thing, not missing, I don't want to use the word missing, but one thing I've seen other locations do well is hone down in one particular sector and become renowned for that particular type of technology. You could talk about Taiwan or somewhere like that becomes well known for that and become world experts in that space, and then can export that knowledge, that IP in their companies by doing that. I'm still a stranger here. I'm still trying to pick up what those key themes of Malaysia are. What are those key sectors that we can associate Malaysia with? Again, in the growth when it comes to ecosystems, you tend to find often you'll start with an e-commerce or fintech network of companies. The next level is software companies, true software, unique software. And it'll be interesting to see once Malaysia starts exporting true software, new concepts around software abroad. That's a really changing moment for any ecosystem.
Thank you. I really like the thought around what's the exportable innovation, right? And that becomes the hallmark. Thank you. Jenny, you've had an impressive track record of, 9 IPOs in the last 5 years, and I can't keep track of how many successful exits through all your M&As, right? So with your track record, what do you look for in successful exits, if I may? And will these factors be the same in Southeast Asia, or are there any market-specific nuances?
Yeah, before I answer that question, can I answer the AI question?
Go for it.
So I have a different view. I think today much has been said about the Magnificent Seven, and that whoever owns the data, the large language model, and compute will win the race. So I think in the short term, I agree, because when an ecosystem is being created, you have a very concentrated number of leaders, right? And in this case, the NVIDIA that owns the compute chip, the larger companies or countries that owns the data would, and if you have huge amount of capital, you will be able to train your model and then be able to build on top of infra layer, the foundational model. And then, of course, the conversation is around who's going to open source and who's going to close source. So at some level, if this is the infra, the highway that's going to enable quick AI compute, that's being built. Last year was the year of the large language model. And then, if we look forward, I actually think that the application guys are going to win. I think it is nuanced. We are saying, how would the application guys win? Of course, today, people are thinking if you own subset of vertical data and you can do fine-tuning, you would win. But I want to draw a parallel. When we, in 2009 and 2010, when we look at the mobile internet boom, at that time, the first set of winners were the guys that makes the phone. And then it was the folks who make the operating system, right? Google opened up Android and became open source. Facebook says, no, I want this to be closed. Or Apple says, I want this to be closed, and therefore the Apple OS. But actually, the bigger winner down the road, as we saw today, were the guys like Facebook, who focus on user experience. The bigger Asia winner is ByteDance, right? TikTok, that actually leveraged then the infra that's been built, the penetration and adoption of mobile handset users around the world, in the region, in country, and then the different advances in sensor technology to then build an app that ultimately, is customized to individual preference, whether it's around ride sharing, right? Uber in the US, Didi in China, maybe, Grab in Southeast Asia. And then when you look at the app layer, actually the number of unicorns, super unicorns that's been created at the app layer, there's actually more players. Of course, if you combine the market cap, there's still, the couple that hits $1 trillion. But as an investor, when I look at this lens, you have a better chance of finding the apps guys when the infra is being built. If you want to get into the infra, obviously huge returns, maybe the 1000x, you may have to take like a 10-year earlier stage risk. So I maybe just a little plug there, which is I feel that today there's still a lot in AI, in Gen AI, that is not known yet. And Asia, I do not think that our Asia guys are going to go out and be the alternative to NVIDIA, or we're going to have, a trillion parameter large model. But I think what Asia historically has done well is because of our diverse demographic, we are able to go down the nuances of user behavior. And so if the world and the infra has been built for you, the compute and the learning someone has paid for it, including the carbon emission they have to inherit, then I think the next bucket is in the right application, right? Is it the to-be application? Is it by vertical or by the consumer? I actually think as an investor, I'm quite excited. I think Asia would be very good in terms of that application. We actually know human psychology way better than the Western players who understand advertising and page views. So I have to jump in because that's what I think every day. Okay, I think the quick thing on exit is this. When we talk to our entrepreneurs, even at Series A, B, or C, actually at the seed and Series A level, I tell them, how do you monetize? We tell the companies, it's actually not too early to think about monetization. It's actually not a sin to try and make money. Like if you build a product, if you build a system, you don't build and wait for things to come. Knowing that ultimately, directionally, you must be able to say who's going to pay, how you're going to charge, and how you're going to make money. So same thing, I think, as an investor, whether you're playing at the seed level, Series A, Series B, or even private equity level, we actually invest with an exit in mind. So at the time of underwriting, we want to make an investment, we actually think about, where is my exit? Is this, for example, if this is a Malaysia company, then we'll look at it and say, is this ultimately an M&A play? Or is this ultimately a IPO play? And so what that means is that being able to chart that path, have the concurrence with the founder becomes very important. Because if you are doing a very important tech stack, but ultimately it's about, the winning factor is about the tech depth and your talent, then you may end up as an M&A play. And so in that situation, the DNA of the company that's being built in Series A, B, C, which investors do you bring alongside you? Ultimately, who do you go talk and be friends with, right? The international community, who could be a potential acquirer, then has to be mapped out in that context. And so it's true that I think for our funds, our loss ratio is less than 10%. It's because we don't sit back and wait for things to happen. We actually, on day one, map this out. Now we have a thesis. Not all theses will work out, but you know, you have to start with kind of an end goal. I know it sounds mercenary, right, for investors, but but we are here to make money for our LPs as well, and so this is important. The last point I'll add is that I've had the benefit of bringing companies public on 6 global exchanges. You know, when we talk about at the end, majority exits, in addition to M&As, is IPOs. And so while there are 2 hats, right? One is maybe the nation building, you want to promote your own exchange, but the reality is that the best companies' exits have to go on the most appropriate exchange that will allow them the continuous ability to fundraise and have the right investor base for themselves. And so as VC investor, actually you may be a local VC, but if you have no idea what it takes to bring a company public in the US exchange, China exchange, Hong Kong exchange, Southeast Asia exchange, then you better brush up on your background, because this is a critical skill set, not just how you find deals, originate, and let's make a spray and pray, right? Bunch of deals, but actually in how you're going to guide the companies through the process. If every deal is like your child, you're not going to let them run around amok, right? Like you want to at least show them a path in terms of how they will look like when they grow up.
Yeah, if I'd just add, I think the listed markets, they don't care where the company comes from. Investors want returns, and that's it. So I think, there's a great ecosystem here helping technology companies grow in the earlier stages, but those companies still have to be competitive on the world scale, and that's it. Otherwise, they won't make it.
Super. Thank you. Apologies, Ole had to run to another meeting, but I promise it is to strengthen the tech investing ecosystem in the country. So all for a good cause. Okay, one final question, actually 2 final questions to round it up. One, let's start with the first one. In a minute or 2 max, if there is one thing, just one thing you had to pick that Malaysian startups or the government could do to make Malaysia more attractive to investors and to VCs, what would it be? Maybe let's start with you, Ben.
I think going back to my previous point, perhaps honing in on a particular industry or a particular sector and saying Malaysia is going to be the world's best in this sector could define the story a little bit.
Love it.
I actually mentioned this last night in the dinner. I think it's about how Malaysia is going to connect with the region and the world on many multiple fronts. Build the addressable market. I think the talent, capital, and the great outcomes will come.
I think we should think big and don't be shy with ambitious goals. And I suppose for the entrepreneurs here, we shouldn't be flippant nor complacent. I think we have to take this opportunity and drive forward. I think the time is right for Malaysia and Southeast Asia in that manner to flourish.
Thank you.
Well, just one thing I would also say is success breeds success. You'll see so many companies are born out of previously successful companies. And I'm sure we'll see that soon here, where a big company, if you look at Spotify in Europe, I think 30 companies are born from people that were involved in that process. And we know what PayPal has led on to SpaceX and everything. So that success will come and create that flywheel of success.
It's a great ad. Thank you. One final fun question, and then we close. If you could represent the Malaysian startup scene today using one cartoon or movie, what would it be and why? Jenny, let's start with you.
I don't have a cartoon or movie, but Malaysia to me is like awakening. Even for me, events like this is excellent. It is showcasing Malaysia as a country, the willingness and the conviction to want to move and support the entrepreneurs. I had a chance to walk around as well, the conference and the summit. It's always good to see that the youngsters in the market is feeling excited, right? Because the government can say, I want, and then the entrepreneurs say, no, I don't want, right? I want to stay in school. So I think to see this interplay, to me, that's why I have questioned, like, maybe we should come here. Maybe we should set up office, because then it's worth, with the right entrepreneur, the right policy, and the right international connection, I think maybe the next 10, 20 years would be Malaysia's awakening on the private enterprise side.
Thank you.
For me, I mean, okay, I played movie lah, but this will reveal my age. I can see that, I mean, the audience, okay lah, we're more or less the same age. So there's a movie called Mighty Ducks back in the 90s. I don't really know that. So I think we like Mighty Ducks, where Coach Gordon Bombay is sort of the government and the sort of the big investors like us trying to gather all the smaller entrepreneurs and startups, and then who don't really realize that they actually have a huge potential that can be unleashed. And we are at the stage where we are gathering that and we're doing this together. And as the movie said, that when the wind is strong and the sky is black, ducks fly together. So yeah.
Love it. Thank you. Ben?
I'm going for Kung Fu Panda.
Wow.
What I love about that story is he was the dragon warrior, but he didn't realize until later, and it took some time. And I think what this event has really shown is that Malaysia is finally showcasing itself to the world. Again, in Europe, it took us a long time to realize that, you know, the US is very good at telling everybody how wonderful they are. And sometimes we all have to do that, let everybody know. And I think this is a great event for Malaysia to showcase its world presence. I think the whole event so far has been absolutely incredible. So I think just like Kung Fu Panda, Malaysia will be the dragon warrior of the world one day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all the panelists, and thank you all for being a very engaged audience.
All right, thank you very much once again to our moderator, Vidya, and to our panelists. I think it's a great choice as well, Kung Fu Panda. Only those in the room who have children, I believe, have watched that show. Otherwise, I believe not. But thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. And do stay tuned, because coming up next, we have a distinguished speaker, our CTO of Amazon, who flew in all the way here in Malaysia to share with us some exciting updates on how AI can be used for good. But first, once again, a big round of applause to our panelists on stage. Thank you so much, Hazman, Jenny, and Ben, for joining us on stage. All right.